Hi everyone, welcome back. Today let's discuss about some basic concepts of fractions. Do you know what are fractions? Numbers that can be expressed in the form a by b, where b not equal to 0 and a and b are integers are called fractions. The numbers that can be expressed in the form a by b is not equal to 0. That is very important. B should not be equal to 0. Since we know that we cannot divide any number by 0. In a fraction a by b, a is called a numerator and b is called the denominator. So, a fraction is equal to numerator by denominator. So, the number above the line is the numerator and the number below the line is the denominator. And the fraction is equal to numerator by denominator. Some of the examples of fractions are 1 by 2, 3 by 5, minus 4 by 7, etc. These are the examples of fractions. Here 1 is the numerator, 2 is the denominator. Here 3 and 4 are the numerators, 5 and 7 are the denominators. Now let's see the classification of fractions. Fractions are classified into decimal fractions, vulgar fractions, proper fractions, improper fractions and mixed fractions. So what are decimal fractions? When the denominator is 10 or the higher powers of 10, that is called as a decimal fraction. Example 1 by 10, 3 by 100, 5 by 10 cube, etc. The denominators are 10 or higher powers of 10 and these are called as the decimal fractions. The next is the vulgar fraction. What is a vulgar fraction? The denominator is other than 10, 100, 1000, etc. that are called vulgar fractions. Example 2 by 3, 4 by 7, 8 by 19, etc. The next is proper fraction. A fraction is a proper fraction when the denominator is greater than the numerator. Denominator should be greater than the numerator. Look at the numerators here 4, 3, 7, etc. And if you are looking at the denominators, you can see that the denominators are greater than the numerator. 3 by 7, 7 is greater than 3, 7 by 19, 19 is greater than 7. So these are the examples of proper fractions. Proper fractions are fractions with a greater denominator than the numerator. The next is improper fractions. Improper fractions are the fractions with the numerator is greater than the denominator. Numerator will be greater than the denominator. 7 by 5. 7 is greater than 5. 9 by 4. 23 by 2. These are the examples of improper fractions. The next is the mixed fractions. Mixed fractions will have an integer with a proper fraction. 2, 3 by 4, 5, 7 by 9. There is an integral part as well as a fraction and that should be a proper fraction. Those are the examples of mixed fractions. So mixed fraction has an integer with a proper fraction. These are the classifications of fractions. So the fractions are classified into decimal fractions, vulgar fractions, proper fractions, improper fractions and mixed fractions. So, and you will be dealing more about these three fractions, that is proper fraction, improper fraction and mixed fractions. If the numerator of a fraction is equal to the denominator, then the fraction is equal to unity or 1. Consider some example. 3 by 3. 3 by 3, here both the numerator as well as the denominator is equal. Therefore, 3 by 3 is equal to 1. So, the fraction is unity or it is equal to 1. And minus 2 by minus 2 and that is equal to 1. 50 by 50 equals 1. 100 by 100 that's equal to 1. When the numerator as well as the denominator is equal, then the fraction is unity or 1. And there is an important point you need to remember is that if the denominator of the fraction can be expressed as 10 or some higher powers of 10, then it is a decimal fraction. Consider an example 7 by 20. 7 by 20 can be written as 7 into 5 by 20 into 5. So 7 5s are 35 by 100. So we can express the 7 by 20 as 35 by 100. And here the denominator is 100. So we can say that this is a decimal fraction. Consider some other example. 29 by 500. So if you multiply this with 2 on both the numerator as well as to the denominator, you can make this with the denominator 1000. So 58 divided by 1000. This will be 58 by 1000, and here also the denominator is the power of 10, or it is a higher power of 10. So we can say that this is also an example of a decimal fraction. Now let's consider some of the examples. So we need to classify these into different types of fractions. Might be the proper fraction, improper fraction, vulgar fraction, or a decimal fraction. Consider the first one. It is 3 by 5. 3 by 5, what is this? This is an example of a proper fraction. Here the numerator is lesser than the denominator. So we can say that this is an example of a proper fraction. Now 11 by 10. 11 by 10. This is an example of a decimal fraction. This can be an example of a decimal fraction since the denominator is 10. And even this is an example of an improper fraction as well. Improper fraction. Because the numerator is greater than the denominator. So this is an example of both decimal fraction as well as improper fraction. Consider the next one, 13 by 20. 13 by 20, this is an example of a proper fraction. Also, this can be expressed as the power of 10. See, 13 by 20 can be written as 13 by 20 into 5 by 5. This will be 65 by 100. So, this is an example of a decimal fraction. Decimal fraction as well as the proper fraction. And look at the next one. This is an example of an improper fraction. The denominator is smaller than the numerator, or the numerator is greater than the denominator. So we can say that this is an example of an improper fraction. Look at the last one, 3 2 by 9. 3 2 by 9, there is an integer as well as a fraction, and this is a proper fraction. So an integer with a proper fraction is a mixed fraction. This is an example of a mixed fraction. So this is how we can classify the fractions into different proper fraction, improper fraction, decimal fraction, mixed fraction, etc. So the decimal fraction can also be considered as a proper fraction because the numerator is lesser than the denominator. So here this can be the example of two types of fractions. There can be proper fractions or decimal fractions, or if the denominator is not the power of 10 or higher powers of 10, we can consider those fractions as the vulgar fractions. And here when there is an integer with a proper fraction, we can say that this is an example of a mixed fraction. Now you classify these given fractions as decimal fraction or vulgar fraction, proper, improper or mixed fractions, and then let me know the answer. That's all for today. Thank you.